blood and meat powder came bursting out of the plate armor. The hammer was thoroughly inside the hobgoblin's head. Judging by the sounds coming out of the dwarf's helm, he was gleeful. It took the 3 dwarves half an hour to tire the dark blood down. Constant harassment, poking him from all sides, bashing him at bay. It was not a fair fight. Not by a long shot. Good. The bastard had it coming the moment it was born. The dwarves used a powder inside the tunnel. It emanated a yellow gas that made all the orcs try to run. They failed at that. Started coughing and twitching on the tunnel floor. With them out of the picture, the hobgoblin tried to run, but his breath was almost gone. Mucus was dribbling out of his whole face. He was barely breathing. Confused, he stumbled into a wall and barely managed to get up in time to parry the charging dwarfs. They harried him constantly, never committing to much effort or intent in the fight to expose themselves. They simply wore him down. They were all tree-seasoned warriors, and probably outranked the hobgoblin in skill by a few centuries. Watching them was like watching cats play with rats. Gruesome. All that weight, all that muscle, and it did the hobgoblin no good. His weapon found itself constantly unable to land in a significantly harmful way with the dwarfs. The spear kept glancing off their armors. It came in at the wrong angles. The dwarfs were making sure of that, using their postures to make the best of their fluted plated armors. All 3 used pole weapons. They made sure to hack at every exposed part of the hobgoblin. The beast was covered in mail, a makeshift covering made from the looted hauberks of a score of knights. Their dried heads made up a gruesome cloak for the beast. The dwarves used their awl-pikes to great effect. At least they looked either like an awl-pike or like an estoc. I was unsure. At any rate, they punctured the areas covered by only 1 or 2 layers of mail, the armpits and the kneecaps. Usually the groin would have been a target as well, but this hobgoblin had a huge codpiece protecting his mail hood. It seemed to be made of brass-covered horn. We made the body count, and it turned out the handful of dwarfs that we were escorting single-handedly took out 67 orcs and a hobgoblin chief. The powder they used expired shortly. It was delivered at the right moment. The slaughter seemed so easy when the dwarfs did it. It made everything look like pest control, if anything, not a proper fight. I knew better. The timing of the powder use, the precise coordination in positioning it so the cave currents don't blow it away, the baiting of the orcs so they think they've got the upper hand with their numbers. It all took calculated risks that, executed by others, had every chance to go awry. The lads started harvesting the dark bloods, but the dwarfs were impatient to go about their business. It is the year of our Lord 916. The ascended Emperor Eldric Ermengild has married the dwarven princess Herdra of Clan Ablegal. The dwarves of Clan Ablegal turned to Christ and were reborn as destitute vagrants, declared outcasts by the judgment of the Mountain King. Warlike by nature, they turned to mercenary work among humans. Over time, their proven worth, impeccable discipline, unwavering loyalty, and the ferocity of their war beasts allowed them to thrive beyond the borders of the former empire. As their reputation grew and their contracts increased in scale, they began recruiting members of other races into their ranks, establishing a meritocratic hierarchy with dwarves firmly at the top, the only exception to the rule being the mountain orc General Krelian. As a direct consequence of the marriage, dwarves are now hired to map out and plot the lad for a new system of defenses within the northern baronies. We were tasked with the escort duty during the engineers' time walking the area. They had their own bodyguards, to be sure, and by the looks of things they were more than enough. But our contract was clear, and we were going to honor it. We encountered 2 more orc parties that day. The dwarves settled the engagements in the same manner. They killed the orcs with an alchemical gas weapon and took care of any hobgoblins or mountain orcs with overpowered missile weapons and polearms. From what I gathered, the Darkbloods were surprised to encounter our sturdy companions. Each time, surprise led to fervent rage. The hate between these 2 races is woven in them somehow. The dwarfs we were with treated us as shepherds treat their dogs. None spoke back to us when we tried to initiate a conversation, and yet they spoke common well enough. During the orc encounters, they would signal us to stay out of the way through hand gestures and guttural sounds. We complied merrily. We were glad to find that the contract was going to be a breeze at this rate. The dwarfs did not seem to tire. We kept walking a moderately difficult cave track, and yet they seemed not to lose their breath over the rough terrain or the fighting sequences. They did not use any maps that we could tell either. They seemed not to lose their way inside the mountain. At first I was amazed by this, but then I gathered what I knew of this breed, and figured their long lives might be the reason. Maybe they were here measuring and prospecting for new information. Maybe they were returning here, and they already had the place memorized by heart a century ago. At any rate, the dwarfs seemed an alien breed, inscrutable and immovable in their craft, relentless in combat as in their toil. They were equipped in fluted plate armor that was closely cropped to their large bodies. They seemed fat and bulky. The possibly were, but strength was in those creatures for sure. While considerably shorter than a man, they were almost twice a man as width and girth. None received any wound. None even came close, not even when fighting mountain orcs. We found Christ stones inside the tunnels. The half-orcs waited a few moments in front of them. It is said that if you witness one shifting size, Jesus loves you. No stone budged. I am not even sure if they were stones. They looked like a mongrel between a crystal and a mushroom. At any rate, the dwarfs looked at the half-orcs with pity. Both half-orcs and dwarfs from Ablegal clan are Christians. Lothar the traitor saint brought the good news to the Ablegal dwarf clans, plunging them in 2 decades of bloody war. Clan Ablegal embraced the Crimson Church faith, and so they look at the High Church half-orcs as superstitious simpletons for their child, like belief that the Lord might wink at them by moving one of the green crystals. Other than religious significance, the green crystals have no use. A few of the orcs gathered some nonetheless. We kept working the trail the following days, killed more orcs. The dwarfs gathered their stone samples, measured things from what we could tell, used peculiar instruments at different spots on the cave trail. Kalisark the Sea Crosser told me things about the world. I learned a great deal about the races of the world. He knew things about the dwarves as well, about their creation myths and their heathen pantheon. There was no way I was going to fact-check that information. One of the dwarves froze as he was walking on the trail. The dwarfs immediately charged uphill on the path sides. I was not sure what exactly. I could only see pitch darkness around our lantern lights. The dwarfs, however, uncharacteristically asked us to join them. A brisk follow accompanied by a hand gesture was all we got. We followed at a brisk pace. The dwarfs were short, but they climbed reasonably fast, with an ape-like gape. We heard the sounds of a large mass moving up ahead. We managed to punch in our fear alchemicals along with the regular combat stims. We immediately regretted following the dwarfs uphill. The creature's sides we wall high. Our lantern-esque light shone over its scale-covered ribs, and it was immense. It must have stood house high. The dwarves threw some sort of naphtha pots at the creature's underbelly. A thick smoke started to emanate, but the creature seemed to be immune as it writhed like mad to escape a net one of the dwarves produced too. Fast for the eye to follow. The net seemed to shimmer in our lights, and the creature's head became immobile, trapped to the cavern wall. The maw was large enough to bite a human in half. Its eyes were as large as a ballista ball. They were rolling around in terror, not understanding what kept its head in place. The dwarfs just as fast went down under the creature and started burying their axes on its legs. They worked fast on its tendons. Soon the creature was only using its hind legs to try and pull itself free. Then the second dwarf froze. The third dwarf poked the foe upwards, making it snarl, flex, and twist. We heard the dwarf yell to take out its tail. We started running away from the immobilized head, revealing the real girth of the beast. It must have been 3 wagons long. Its tail was massive, but it was held high, like a scorpion's. deeper from right next to me froze. 4 more from our ranks also stopped moving. The rest of us started hacking at the monstrous tail with our weapons. We barely grazed the scales. Our weapons were inadequate. Blades made for opening flesh and puncturing mail glanced off the slimy scales. Soon enough, we were exhausted. I shat my pants when I realized we meant me and the dwarf. The rest were immobile, frozen stiff. He grabbed me by the hand, and we tumbled down the hill. We kept running away with the creature writhing mutely behind us. We made a left turn on the path, and the dwarf stopped me in my tracks. He opened his visor, and I unclasped my breather mask. His face was like granite, not necessarily ugly, but brutish and primal. Mine was a mask of terror, probably. The lads were left behind. I could hear the beast struggle to free itself. The dwarf spoke a few words, not fluent common, but I understood. We fought a basilisk. It was not supposed to be here. The orcs must have brought it from below. Our companions were going to die if we could not get them back to camp soon. We had to slay the basilisk first. The dwarf started taking his armor off, gestured for me to do the same. I started doing so, but he had to help out with the rebreather. The point was to open up a vein in its throat and not get stunned in the process. We were to approach the beast as stealthy as we could and sprint towards our goal as soon as we were discovered. We covered our bodies in slime from the pools around. We looked like Picts if nothing else. My last companion led the way. He instructed me to follow in his footsteps as closely as I could. He spoke very little. His voice sounded like 2 pieces of granite grinding syllables in pain. The message was clear enough. I was to ignore my mates. We would pass right next to them, and I was to ignore them. There was nothing to be done for them as long as the beast drew breath. And so I decided not to look at them, to keep my cool and focus for the task at hand. I used my lower cannula to chem myself up for the coming fight. I was abusing alchemicals. Normally, I was supposed to cycle off for a few days after all I did these past few days. Never mind. I had a job to do. The group was depending on me. Sure enough, the way back to the creature was littered with stunned companions. They held their poses without exception. They looked like statues. At times, the dwarf used them as cover, hiding at their feet. The dwarf was indeed silent without all his gear on. He moved slowly and with a method of masking his footstep sprees when the creature shifted. I followed. We managed to get pretty close to the beast without detection. The basilisk no longer tried to free its head. It was breathing hard, exhausted by the battle and the attempts of untangling itself. It looked appalling, its front legs limp, with half of its body crumbled over them. But the tail was still up, rapidly changing orientation, as if scanning the area around. I then noticed something very peculiar. The head of the tail was in sync with its eyes. The coordination was uncanny. Somehow it reminded me of a chicken's ability to keep its head fixed on a point as you move it around. I was having all sorts of thoughts. The alchemicals were messing with my head. Not enough cooldown for my system. The dwarf signaled me to get ready. I collected myself, grabbed my poleaxe tightly, and committed myself to a last-minute prayer. I asked the good Lord Christ to receive my soul, and thanked him for the blood in whose name I was certain of my salvation. I was surprised to see the dwarf crossing himself like a human. It felt wrong watching him do that. I reminded myself of Mark 16:15 and caught myself being a bigoted racist. Or was it the alchemicals? They usually bring out the worst in a man. Which was perfect for this occasion, as we were about to try our best to inflict carnage on the basilisk. At the proper sign, we both charged the beast. I saw the large golden eyes of the basilisk fix us, and the dwarf stopped instantly in mid-flight. The tail pointed right at him. I barely registered him as I left the dwarf behind, alchemically eager to get in striking range with the creature. All I felt were tendrils of pain crawling beneath my skin. I never felt anything like it. The sensation switched between that of extreme cold and extreme heat, in close succession. I could not move anything. It was like a crystal clear state of sleep paralysis. Panic struck me as my breath slowed down unnaturally. My last fragments of memories were of utter dread. I woke up as a hellish creature was fidgeting over my lower cannula. I was having all sorts of feedback from my body. Pain, yes, everywhere, but also cold. And then there was the fidgeting with my cannula. I tried to look down and a noose tightened around my throat. There was more pain, of a higher order, from the noose's touch. It felt like a crooked finger reached through that noose, raking every nerve, from my throat to my heart. I felt like it was about to burst. My chest was pounding as I felt spasms rush through me. My back arched like a bow. I could make no sound. I writhed mutely like a worm on a crooked hook. Slowly the spasms subsided, and I managed to gather my thoughts. I could make out shapes around me. The light was dim and yellow. Must be torches. I tried to look around without moving my head. At the edge of my vision, I made out the creature working on my lower cannula. It looked like a child, but was ritually scarred and had bearded human faces sewn to his own skin. I could not be in hell. I was saved by the holy blood. Finally, the goblin turned and showed me his head mask. It was another face. Could have been dwarven by the size of the beard and the width of the nose. Dwarven or Orion. It croaked something. Could have been words in black speech. Then it laughed. My blood froze. Nothing in this world sounded so malicious. My body was forcefully brought up by many small hands. It felt like a score of mad children were manhandling me upwards. I was fixed on a rack. I saw a naked husk of a man in front of me. He seemed like a living skeleton. One leg was missing, and in its place, a blackened stump told the grisly story of a makeshift amputation. Next to him was the Hellchild Goblin. He was covered in face skins and was holding a staff of a sort, fashioned from something that looked like white driftwood. It poked the man in the groin. Pain and realization seared through me at the same time. The wretch placed a mirror in front of me. I lost a leg. The following days will not be described in this telling. I was raped, repeatedly, and forced to watch the mirror. I was fed my own flesh. I was eaten alive. Body torture that broke me useless for a decade followed. I saw worse happen to some around me. I was lucky. The goblins resented the dwarves most of all. That much was hellishly obvious. I did not escape that situation. I was drowning when the goblins started coughing up blood. Two of them were trying to lift me from the barrel they were using for the task. All three of us fell limp. I fell right back into the water, head first. I had no breath to hold. I tried instinctively to kick and thrash around, but the pain from the collar started to kick in again. I stiffened with pain while drowning. I drowned. Blackness. And the taste of metal. I realized I was alive because I could taste things in the muck I drowned in. My breath was slow, almost non-existent, yet it was there somehow. It felt like I was breathing through a wet cloth. It was close to suffocating, but not quite. I was breathing underwater. It must have been Kalisark's alchemicals. They had an unhoped side effect of somehow allowing me to get a muffled breath out of the muck I was in. I stayed there, slowly breathing in the sludge from the barrel. I passed out again, woke up looking at a half-orc. His mongrel yellow eyes looked back into mine. He spoke, yet I did not register. My mind was broken. Words made no sense. I was only hearing babble, and the more I tried to focus on the words, the more my mind seemed to revert into itself. I just felt like I wanted to die, but had no will or strength to do anything. So I fell into deep nothingness. Sleep. I was told I slept for a full week. They reattached a cannula to my only leg, and so were able to feed me. The first months of wakefulness I was kept in a monastery, tied, in a half-orc compound from the high church. Strong alchemicals were force-fed into my cannula. Slowly, my mind began to patch meaning out of the babble my warden spoke to me. My thoughts were foggy, and I could only focus on the present. I remember trying to pray and failing. I remember holding on to Romans 8 with 26. In 6 months, I remembered what happened but was disconnected from the reality of it. It was like the ordeal happened to someone else. These were the coping alchemicals doing their job, they told me. In time, the trauma would resurface, but that was to be dealt with later. At that point in time, I was able to limp around on crutches. I was told that my recovery was paid for by dwarven gold. A bracelet sealed the transaction. I had 4 more months of healing credit to go. But I felt deceptively fine. My wardens told me as much. They said my mind was in pieces held together only by the alchemicals I was using on a daily basis. It mattered not to me. I signed a document waiving off the rest of the transactioned healing time and wanted to set off after my company, or what was left of it. I ended back at the fortified monastery after a first attempt at journeying on my own. I stood no chance in the state I was in, so there was nothing left for me to do but talk with my keepers. I was interested in what happened and who my benefactor was. The dwarves we were with discovered a hidden deep goblin tribe recently moved in the galleries we were prospecting. They were the ones that brought up the basilisk. Deep goblins hate moving upwards. Something forced them to do so. It must have been the dwarven clan Drosnargul, old mountain dwarf heathens that worship their ancestors, and a select cadre of anomalies. The goblins that captured us were pursued remnants of a larger union of tribes that got obliterated deeper below. When the mop-up dwarf force reached the goblin splinter group, they must have used alchemical powders to choke the whole dark blood camp. I was apparently twitching, with the part hanging out of my drawn barrel, and so caught the eye of one of the dwarves. For some reason, he took me as a sign and deposited me, along with the bracelet, in the care of one of our dwarven allies, that in turn haggled for my resuscitation at the High Church Strong Monastery. I was told my companions were said to have vowed to check up on me in a year's time. I was to make use of this span as I would best see fit. Since I was in a repository of knowledge, I decided to study some of the texts accessible to the public within this fortified repository. I looked for information related to the known 7 dwarven clans. To understand the dwarves, I was told I must first understand the Fae properly. What little is understandable about them, at least. The Fae are told to predate the founding of the world. The word Fae generally describes someone or something with an otherworldly, eccentric, or magical quality. It often refers to unconventional, whimsical, or strangely sensitive behavior that seems out of touch with reality. The creatures known as Fae embody these traits to the superlative. The Fae are defined by 3 fundamental characteristics. First, they are otherworldly and whimsical, existing beyond the boundaries of mortal understanding. Second, they possess an innate clairvoyance, or at the very least an unfathomably deep attunement to the weaving, perceiving its currents and patterns with an implacable certainty. Third, they are overwhelmingly powerful, beings whose actions are, for all practical purposes, unstoppable by the lesser races. The temperament of the Fae is notoriously fickle. Their moods and intentions can shift without warning, ranging from acts of apparent kindness and benevolence to displays of staggering cruelty, malice, and even child-eating depravity. As a race, they defy attempts at categorization. No coherent logic governs their collective behavior, and any effort to understand them as a whole inevitably ends in contradiction. For the most part, the Fae communicate only among their own kindred. Direct interaction with members of other races is exceedingly rare. When such contact does occur, it is seldom motivated by goodwill. More often, the purpose appears to be humiliation, degradation, or the testing of mortal resolve. Any request, bargain, or challenge presented by a Fae inevitably pushes the recipient to the limits of endurance, dignity, or sanity. Accounts of these encounters can be found throughout the folklore and oral traditions of every race. Over countless generations, elders and wise men have prescribed elaborate rites and customs intended to ensure that communication with the Fae occurs in a proper and respectful manner. These Fae rites are often intentionally humiliating to the practitioner. Tradition holds that this is no accident. Indeed, many believe the rites themselves were originally dictated by the Fae, specifically to remind the lesser races of their place in the natural order, a place far beneath that of the Fae. The Fae are creatures of contradiction. At one time or another, they seem to hate nearly everything. Their likes and dislikes shift without warning, and no universal pattern can be discerned. Yet, there is one exception. Across all known accounts, the Fae display a consistent and absolute loathing for progress and change. Any endeavor associated with technological advancement inevitably attracts their hostility. Innovations are sabotaged, inventions fail under inexplicable circumstances, and ambitious projects are plagued by misfortune. Of all mortal developments, none draw the Fae's wrath more than black powder and firearms. The use of such devices is regarded by them as an unforgivable transgression. The punishment for employing these forbidden crafts is swift, disproportionate, and unimaginably cruel. The Fae do not limit their vengeance to the inventor or user alone. They routinely make examples of entire communities, extending their retribution to all who were present or associated with the offender. History records numerous instances in which entire civilizations were annihilated through bizarre, creative, and horrifying means merely because firearms had been used within their borders. This relentless persecution explains the deep-rooted stigma surrounding firearms in every culture of the known world. Fear of Fae retaliation has ensured that such weapons remain not merely taboo, but existentially dangerous to all who would dare employ them. You understand why the Dwarves have a lot to fear from the Fae. Being generally considered the most technologically inclined of all the races, the Dwarves court disaster at every civilizational turn. That's maybe why they have no civilizational turns at all. They are a straight-arrow conservative lot, entrenched in their rights and beliefs. Conservatives to the core, employing all technology in a very ritualized and top-down controlled way. The Dwarves have always been a secretive people. Throughout recorded history, they have preferred isolation over diplomacy, choosing to keep largely to themselves and limiting their interactions with the other races whenever possible. Their society is driven by an insatiable fascination with engineering, craftsmanship, metallurgy, architecture, and every conceivable form of skilled handiwork. To the Dwarven mind, mastery of craft is among the highest virtues. This cultural inclination has long placed them in a difficult position. Their natural desire for efficiency, innovation, and technological advancement stood in direct opposition to the realities of survival in a world governed by the whims of the Fae. Thus, Dwarven civilization has spent centuries balancing its hunger for progress against the necessity of avoiding Fae attention. They have successfully done so through a rigid way of thinking inside a conservative mindset. Historically, humanity has maintained contact with only 7 recognized Dwarven clans. Whether these clans represent the entirety of the Dwarven race remains unknown. Persistent rumors speak of additional clans dwelling far deeper beneath the mountains, beyond the reach of human exploration. If such clans exist, they have never established meaningful contact with the surface world and remain little more than legends. In recent decades, however, Dwarven society has been shaken by an unprecedented religious controversy. Approximately 50 years ago, a dwarf known to humans as Lothar carried the Christian gospel into the mountain kingdoms. His mission met with universal rejection. The central tenets of the faith appeared nonsensical to the Dwarven mind. The notion that a human could purchase salvation for all creature kind through the sacrifice of his own blood was viewed as absurd and irrational. As a deeply conservative and tradition-bound people, the dwarves regarded Christianity as little more than a human religious innovation, an offshoot and deviation of the older Orion faith. Even as Christianity spread like wildfire throughout the kingdoms of men, the dwarves remained largely unimpressed. To them, the rapid growth of the new religion seemed merely another human peculiarity. Everything changed during the campaign that culminated in the Battle of the Five Nargabund Hills. At that time, the Mountain King had united all known dwarven clans into a single alliance to oppose a massive mountain orc host, commanded by Northrak the Flayed, the current chief of the Mountain Orcs. The battle was one of the bloodiest conflicts in dwarven history. Though victorious, the alliance paid a terrible price. Records state that 30,084 dwarves perished in the fighting. Among the forces assisting the dwarven coalition was a contingent of Christian humans. Within their ranks rode a knight-errant of humble birth, a hedge knight known as Sir Mikhail. After the siege had been broken and the orc host scattered, the dead dwarves were gathered into wagons for transport and burial. It was then that Sir Mikhail sought an audience with the Mountain King. All accounts from the numerous witnesses agree that Sir Mikhail approached the Mountain King with an extraordinary proposal. He allegedly asked whether he, King of Dwarves, would consider accepting Christ if the dead of the battle were restored to life. To the dwarven mind, the request was so outrageous as to deserve death. The king's guards slew Sir Mikhail where he stood for daring to make such a mockery of dwarven grief. According to this account, the knight later rose from the dead and proceeded to resurrect not only the fallen dwarves, but also the dead humans who had fought beside them. The event occupies a unique place in the history of the old world. Resurrection through the weaving is not something that occurs. It never has. Across every known civilization, throughout all recorded history and countless oral traditions, there exists no verified account of a person dying and later returning fully restored in body, mind, and soul. Such a phenomenon is entirely absent from the historical record. There are certainly arts that tamper with death. Practices such as necroshine and vitae manipulate corpses and lingering remnants of life through the weaving. Likewise, the Necrosavants and the Nosferatu achieve states that imitate life beyond death. Yet these are distortions, imitations, and transformations. They are not true resurrection. Never before had a dead individual been restored in his own flesh, bearing his own memories, identity, and selfhood intact. Yet this is precisely what the Mountain King believes occurred. A spell. Nothing more. So too do many of the dwarves who claim to have witnessed the miracle with their own eyes. Not all were convinced. Many dismissed the event as deception, sorcery, misunderstanding, or outright fabrication. Nevertheless, a significant number of dwarves were persuaded by what they had seen. The consequences were immediate. 3 clans, Abligal, Nargabund, and Kazmar, accepted the Christian faith and embraced what their kin regarded as a human-born heresy. Their conversion sparked outrage throughout the mountain realms. The Mountain King ultimately cast the 3 clans out from dwarven society. The exiled clans accepted the judgment without rebellion. Though condemned and driven from their ancestral place among the mountain kingdoms, they continued to honor the authority of the Mountain King. To this day, they remain loyal to their sovereign, even while living as outcasts, separated from the people whose traditions they once shared. The rest of the 4 dwarven clans, Khazrukar, Torvakrun, Urzgrond, and Droznargul, remain staunchly pagan, in fervent devotion to their inscrutable and mysterious